Welcome back to this walkthrough of The Alchemist. So this video will primarily cover the Englishman and Santiago's journey through the desert. And as always, I just want to warn you that there are spoilers in this video. The Englishman is currently sitting down reading a book, and we're told he's sitting in a part warehouse, part corral. And this place smells of animals. And the Englishman has devoted his life to trying to find and understand the language of the world, and to unraveling the secrets of the Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life. And he's also seeking out this fabled alchemist. The Englishman grew up wealthy, and he has a fortune at his disposal, and he has spent a lot of this money going to libraries and reading very technical tracts. So he's very technical as well. In contrast with the boy who grew up somewhat impoverished and who has this casual and simplistic approach to understanding the world. The boy often has this tendency to run into people who are equally as far along their journey as he is. And this is no exception with the Englishman, even though they're so different in their approach. And so as the Englishman is sitting here reading, reflecting on his journey, I'm going to find that damned alchemist, the Englishman thought, and the odor of the animals became a bit more tolerable. We've seen this with the boy, how important mindset is, and how important it is to focus on the right aspects of one's dream to compel one forward. So the boy enters this part stall, part warehouse, and he sits down. And when he sits down, he opens his book. "That's strange," said the boy, as he tried once again to read the burial scene that began the book. "I've been trying for 2 years to read this book, and I never get past these first few pages." He's been writing his own journey, so he doesn't need to read the stories of other people's journeys. So the boy walks in, and he notices the Englishman sitting there reading in this part warehouse, part corral. Nearby was the Englishman, reading a book. He seemed unfriendly, and had looked irritated when the boy had entered. They might even have become friends, but the Englishman closed off the conversation. So the boy thinks the Englishman looks unfriendly and irritated by the boy's presence, but I want to emphasize here that this is what the boy thinks, because it may or may not be true of the Englishman's actual behavior. The boy blames the Englishman for closing off the conversation, but he doesn't realize that he could have also made overtures of friendship to overcome the Englishman's reluctance or just to strike up a conversation. No, instead he just blames the Englishman. Granted, the Englishman didn't try to befriend the boy either, nor does he seem to be aware of his own dismissive behavior when his attention is so fixed on the book in front of him. So the boy still has this reluctance to engage. However, one positive change to notice in the boy is that the boy realizes here that they could have been friends, showcasing that he's more open to possibility, especially compared to when he had previously first met the king. The boy closed his book. He felt that he didn't want to do anything that might make him look like the Englishman. And I just think this is a little petty. So the boy pulls out these 2 stones. The Englishman sees them, recognizes them, and gets excited, and engages the boy in conversation. "They were given to me as a present by a king," the boy said. The stranger didn't answer. Instead, he put his hand in his pocket and took out 2 stones that were the same as the boy's. "Did you say a king?" he asked. "I guess you don't believe a king would talk to someone like me, a shepherd," he said, wanting to end the conversation. Now it's the boy's turn to become judgmental. He wants to shut down the conversation, and he reciprocates the Englishman's irritation. Being similarly positioned along their journey, they're sort of acting the same way. But they do both get over themselves, and they do become very fast friends. And they bond over this idea of omens, the elixir of life, and they both have things to teach one another. So a little later, they're preparing to embark on their journey across the desert. And one of the caravan leaders says, "In the desert, disobedience means death. This is going to be a test." And if you remember earlier, the boy swore to Jesus Christ. And in the desert, Jesus Christ was tested. "I've crossed these sands many times," said one of the camel drivers one night, "but the desert is so huge and the horizon so distant that they make a person feel small and as if he should remain silent." So the desert is a test of courage, but I think more than anything, it's a test of understanding. How willing are you to listen and to learn, and to pick up the signs and omens? In the desert, one doesn't get to dictate or decide their fate. You have to respond to the omens accurately and learn in order to survive. In response to this, the boy understood intuitively what he meant. even without ever having set foot in the desert. Whenever he saw the sea or a fire, he fell silent, impressed by their elemental force. And I think this reverence for the elemental here in the desert illustrates that there are forces beyond any individual human. And I think it's invoking God. I've learned things from the sheep, and I've learned things from crystal, he thought. I can learn something from the desert too. It seems old and wise. The boy was beginning to understand that intuition is really a sudden immersion of the soul into the universal current of life, where the histories of all people are connected, and we are able to know everything because it's all written there. Maktu, the boy said, remembering the crystal merchant. The caravan has to keep making detours and avoiding obstacles, and the boy comes to a very deep understanding. No matter how many detours and adjustments it made, the caravan moved toward the same compass point once obstacles were overcome. It returned to its course, sighting on a star that indicated the location of the oasis. And I think the boy is realizing this is very similar to the way he's processing and following his dream. It was only the Englishman who was unaware of all this. He was, for the most part, immersed in reading his books. The boy too had his book, and he had tried to read it during the first few days of the journey, but he found it much more interesting to observe the caravan and listen to the wind. The boy thinks that when he's reading a book, he's going to miss something important, whereas the Englishman feels the exact opposite. He's worried that he's missed something in his books. So it turns out, as they're traversing this desert, they get word that there's a tribal war. The boy noted that there was a sense of fear in the air, even though no one said anything. Once again, he was experiencing the language without words, the universal language. The boy sort of gets frustrated with the Englishman, and he says, "You should pay more attention to the caravan, and you ought to read more about the world," answered the Englishman. And that's basically the end of that conversation. They both have their different mode of trying to seek the soul of the world, to understand this universal language. But oddly enough, right here, neither could convey the importance to the other about their mode of understanding. There's merit to both of these methods, but the boy presented it in such a way that it was a bit antagonistic, and the Englishman reacted to it and stubbornly dismissed it. And later, one night, the Englishman can't sleep. The Englishman and the boy go walk around. They stood there looking at the moon. "That's the magic of omens," said the boy. "I've seen how the guides read the signs of the desert, how the soul of the caravan speaks to the soul of the desert." The Englishman said, "I'd better pay more attention to the caravan, and I'd better read your books," said the boy. The moment they took a more compassionate, empathetic approach, they were both much more receptive to looking at the world through the eyes of the other. Seeing the world through the eyes of someone else is important because when you tap into the soul of the world, the histories of everyone are interconnected. So when you do make the effort and you see the world through the eyes of someone else, it's as if you're one step closer to that soul of the world and its infinite connectability. So they're still in the desert, and they're still dreading the possibility of a bandit attack. And the boy undertakes to read these tomes from the Englishman. They spoke about Mercury, salt, dragons, and kings, and he didn't understand any of it. The boy continues to ask questions to the Englishman, trying to understand these books. And I do want to remark that it does seem like the boy is more intent to learn the Englishman's books than the Englishman is to learn and observe the caravan. I don't believe that the Englishman ever asked the boy anything about the caravan or things he's come to understand. And so the boy's reading these books, he's asking questions. It does seem like the Englishman derives satisfaction and pride from being able to instruct the boy. And he tells him something about one of the books, that when these alchemists were purifying metal, they realized that they purified themselves as well. And here the boy remembers something. The boy thought about the crystal merchant. He had said that it was a good thing for the boy to clean the crystal pieces so that he could free himself from negative thoughts. The boy was becoming more and more convinced that alchemy could be learned in one's daily life. Anything the Englishman tries to teach him from these books, the boy makes a comparison to something that he's experienced in his life that's analogous to what the Englishman is saying. It's interesting. After asking the Englishman one of these questions, the Englishman replies, "You have a mania for simplifying everything." And I think we can also say that the Englishman himself has a mania for overcomplicating things. So one day when the boy returns the books to the Englishman enthusiastically asks him, "Did you learn anything?" And the boy points out a few things here and there that he's learned. But then he says, "But above all, I learned that these things are so simple that they could be written on the surface of an emerald." The Englishman was disappointed. This is the boy's, mania for oversimplifying things. He is discovering things accurately. The Englishman is the one who fails to see this. The Englishman thinks his soul must be too primitive to understand these things, he thought. So the boy made an attempt to understand the world through the Englishman's eyes. The Englishman just has a condescending view of the way the boy sees the world. And then immediately after this, the Englishman said, "Go back to watching caravans," he said. "They didn't teach me anything either." And later, to his credit, the boy says to himself, everyone has his or her own way of learning things. And so this is why the boy is going to surpass the Englishman in his quest, because he's so much more open. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you on the next video.